Russia is turning to an unlikely source for gasoline. Just how did the gas station of the world become a gas importer from Asia? And is the problem only going to get worse as the US is ramping up the pressure on Putin? I'm Paul, US Army combat veteran. Hit subscribe and let's talk about it. But first, of course, you guys know that it is fall. And if you're like me, you have a lot on your plate. I have 2 young kids under 2. I'm training for a half Ironman and I'm a full-time content creator and I need caffeine. That's why I created Strike Gum. Strike Gum, it's veteran owned. I'm the veteran. It's made here in the USA at a facility out in Denver. It's got 0 sugar and 100 milligrams of alpha GPC, and most importantly, 90 milligrams of caffeine in each piece. That's why it's used by offshore oil rig workers, Ukrainian drone pilots, athletes, and tired dads to stay focused and locked in. And our sale is huge. It's literally buy 2 of anything, get 1 free. So you can buy a single pack, try it out, buy 2 single packs and get your 3rd free. Buy the 5-pack so you can be sustained for 3 straight weeks, or buy the tray, get your 15 packs, our best deal. Buy 2, get a 3rd free. Plus it stacks with free shipping if you're in the US, and subscribe and save. So this is, if you're waiting for the time to try Strike Gum, this is it. Okay. So the link is in the description as always. Now let's talk about Russia's fuel problem. So Russia, remember, Russia is a country that its economy is so dominated by oil and gas production that it is referred to as a gas station. All right. It is a gas station that sometimes it is a nuclear armed gas station. It is now importing gasoline from Asia to try to offset the fuel shortage that is wrecking the economy, since Ukrainian attacks have disrupted 40% of the country's oil refining capability. Now, as we talk about, Russia can still export crude oil, but this isn't nearly as profitable as refining gasoline is, right? Obviously, as you can imagine, just like any other sort of export, raw materials less valuable than the refined product. And so the fact that 40% of Russia's ability to produce gas is now offline, it's a huge problem. But even if they were to import gasoline en masse from countries like China and other allies, it can't really be done, right? Because as Russian gas stations have their fuel fall to effectively 0, what the struggle is that the ability to mass import gasoline, the infrastructure simply doesn't exist within Russia. And this is the first sort of crisis they're running into. Even if China was to say, sure, we'll sell you all the gas you want, buddy, there's no pipeline to get fuel from China to Russia. It has to be carried 1 shipful at a time, very, very slowly. But a lot of these ships and ship capacity doesn't even really exist to ferry it from, again, Asian countries into Russia. And Russia has never invested in this infrastructure because it's never been necessary. Why? Well, obviously, because Russia is a huge oil producer. It's used to having not just gas in surplus, but actually gas that is unbelievably cheap, subsidized, in fact. And so the fact that Russian cars now you're seeing gasoline lines in some social media posts, we see lines up to 130 cars long to get a full tank of gas from Russian fuel stations that still have fuel. And the crisis is only getting worse as Russian fuel diminishes across the country. Now, things are only going to get worse, though, because the U.S. is giving Ukraine intelligence and long-range targets on key energy infrastructure facilities within Russia. This is huge because, as we know, the U.S. has been extremely slow to react to Putin's escalations in this war. As we talked about, when Putin invaded Kharkiv last year, he massed troops just over the border, and U.S. policy at the time was don't help the Ukrainians strike anywhere into Russian sovereign territory. And then the Russians literally stood there and mocked the Ukrainians, saying, listen, you can't touch us with your U.S.-made weapons, despite seeing us mass just a few hundred meters on the Russian side of the border. And then they invaded, and then the Ukrainians were able to strike them. And so the US said, okay, we'll let the Ukrainians strike within military targets only within something like 10 kilometers of the Ukrainian border. And only after that did Putin go, oh, what an escalation, these dangerous Biden-era impulsiveness. And it's like, dude, you played the game. You played stupid games, right? It's like taunting the bouncer, going, eventually the bouncer's going to smack you in the face. And so, but again, the US still said, well, Ukraine, you can't strike Russian energy infrastructure targets. Sure, that's the lifeblood of the Russian war machine. And sure, it's used to not just finance the war, but also to literally fuel the vehicles that run it. And they said, sure, the Russians attack not only Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, not only do they target Ukrainian civilian energy infrastructure, but they also target Ukrainian infrastructure like hospitals, not even military hospitals, cardiology institutes, a kid's cancer ward. But still, despite all that, the US said, whoa. Just because Russia does something bad doesn't give you the right to do it too. And that's true, but after years, finally, we're seeing the US say, okay, clearly, if you're at war with a gas station, it might be helpful to take out some gas pumps. And so that's what we're finally starting to see, is the US saying, listen, we'll give you the coordinates of Russia's best gas pumps. But not only that, but reportedly, the White House is actually starting to roll out, potentially, Tomahawk cruise missiles to the Ukrainians. Now, here's another classic example of Russian bullshit, is because Russia has said, oh, guys, these Tomahawk missiles, they're a red line. Now, bear in mind, Russia has had no less than 7 different red lines, all of which have been violated, and all of which Russia introduced no consequences for. And so, again, Russia simply uses the word red line to be like, this is bad. They said providing F-16s was a red line. They said arming Ukraine in any way was a red line. They said U.S. weapons striking into Russian territory was a red line. But again, in almost every occasion, it is projection. It is Russia saying it's a red line to engage in behaviors that Russia routinely engages in. And as we've pointed out on this channel, both administrations, Biden and Trump, have let Vladimir Putin always lead the dance. They only respond. So if Putin says, hey, I'm okay, I've prepared enough, I think it's okay if U.S. weapons strike into Russia, well, he masses his troops and plays the I dare you to hit me game. So now we're seeing it with these Tomahawk missiles, right? This is, of course, a fast-flying cruise missile that is quite hard for Russian air defenses to hit and quite long range and moves a lot of ordnance a long way. Very much more effective than what we've seen from Ukrainian homemade drones, which are slower and carry a smaller warhead. Now, what's funny, hilarious, in fact, is that Russian government spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the weapons, if delivered, they're not going to be a game changer in the war, which is a hint that they might be a game changer in the war. But that he said the U.S. is crossing a red line that Moscow previously set over what it called direct interference by Ukraine's allies in the ongoing war. Peskov said the question, as before, is this. Which one? This is a standard Russian propaganda tactic where they don't want to say something aloud because that requires committing to a stance. Instead, they say, here's a question. I'm just asking questions, right? It's like a flat earther who goes, listen, I'm just asking questions. What do you think the shape of the globe is? You're like, dude, if you don't think it's round, just say it. Peskov says the question is as before. Who can launch these missiles? Can only Ukrainians launch them, or do American soldiers have to do that? Who is determining the targets of these missiles? The American side or the Ukrainians themselves? Right? Moscow said that it would consider the provision of targeting data or intelligence to launch attacks crossing a line. It's repeatedly suggested that Russia could restart production of intermediate range nuclear weapons and station missiles within striking distance of the West, which is also kind of stupid because ICBMs, they can reach the West anyway, right? But what I think is worth remembering is that Russia itself, literally 3 days ago, went to the UN and said, guys, Russia is at war with NATO and the European Union over Ukraine. This is directly. Lavrov says NATO and European Union want to declare, in fact, and have already declared a real war on my country and are directly participating in it. So this is classic Russian bullshit, where they go, that's it. We're at war with you Westerners. And the West is like, they're not even like, okay, let's go to war. They say, okay, well, we're going to make a small policy change to slightly increase the range at which our weapons can strike Russian targets. And they go, what are you doing? Why are you at war with us? How could you do this? This is unthinkable. And it's like, I don't know, dude. Maybe you shouldn't have gone to the UN and been like, you're at war with us. This is just classic Russian bullshitting. I don't know what else to call it. Hypocrisy. And it's propaganda, right? So and bear this in mind, Russia has a lot of its own propaganda agents, willing and unwilling, in the United States. So when you see someone who rolls this kind of rhetoric out, who repeats it back, a news station, a Twitter account, whatever it is, you can identify it as being repeating obvious Russian talking points. Because again, it's not escalatory to go to the UN and say, we're at war with NATO and the US, and then to say, oh, well, this is a red line that you must want war with Russia. It's absolutely comical. Anyway, guys, huge thank you to Sergei Zinchenko, Alan Knudsen, Alfred Chesky, Paul Wheeler, Michael Colleen, as well as all of our lieutenant tier members. You guys make this whole thing possible. I appreciate you so much, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Cheers.